Om Tat Sat. Ellargu Namaskara. Good evening, friends. Yesterday we had the chance to look at some of the episodes from the first volume of Jnapaka-chitra-shaale. We saw how DVG went to meet Anand Rao, and he said you should go and meet people who have met Rangacharlu if you want to write about him, to capture the mannerisms and how he goes to different places and finds that people either they just use extreme adjectives, or they use this as a chance to talk about themselves, how Rangacharlu asked them some very important question and they gave the right answer. And then we saw how D.V. Gundappa went to Ramchandra Rao, Krishna Swami Iyer and Varadacharya to polish his poem on Swami Abhedananda, and also a few other very, very interesting personalities from the first volume. This volume is a very eclectic collection. If we see the second volume, the third, the fourth, fifth, they are more organized under one category, whereas the first volume has a wide array of extraordinary people. So we also met Achyut Rao and H.V. Nanjunaya and M.R. Srinivasmurthy. Now we will go to a very interesting household called Bhashyam Devadi. And here the word Devadi is very interesting. It is an informal reference to a place which is like a club where like-minded people come together, friends come together to have a good time. Either it could be engaging in serious conversation or in idle gossip, or just to spend a good time with light entertainment and some snacks and so on. So this Bhashyam family is one such place, and DVG starts off by saying one of the places that I consider as a university was a south-facing house ahead of the Narasimhaswamy temple in Badepete. So DVG never went to any university. He was a 10th standard fail. But this house was like a university for him. And it was the birthplace of the Kannada newspaper. And DVG writes, if Mysore were to be the United States, some wealthy person would have purchased that house and made it into a museum. Because the Western world, they preserve all these things. For them, a 100-year-old monument or a place is something very ancient. For us, 100-year, even our houses are 100 years old in some cases. So we don't have that, probably we don't have a value for something that is so recent, given our long history. Then he talks about the birth of the Karnataka Prakashika, which is the first newspaper which started by Bhashyam Tirumalacharya, and then he talks about his son. And again, like I said yesterday, a lot of friendly gatherings used to happen on many occasions, and this was a great opportunity for people like DVG, who were youngsters at that time, to interact with some of the brightest minds of that period of time. So if you just take an example, here this group of friends who would gather every evening at Bhashyam Devadi would include G.G. Narasimhacharya, R.A. Krishnamacharya, who are both disciples of Vivekananda, then Pandit Asuri Anandalvar, who later became the Jier of the Yadugiri Yatiraja Matha, then S.G. Narasimhacharya's son Rangaswamy, then Navinam Ramanujacharya, then the forest conservator H. Srinivas Rao, advocate C. Sheshacharya, and other people. So you can see it is not a group of people, all of them belonging to the same profession or same sub-community. It is a very eclectic mix of people from various backgrounds, and each person contributing something unique to the discussion. And speaking about R.A. Krishnamacharya, DVG says, among the people I have seen, he is the one who can be called a philosopher. And he was so affectionate towards youngsters. He never had any attachment to his family or his people. He looked at everybody as his family. He would go to, some exam is going on. He would prepare food stuffs, go and give it to students. It doesn't have to be his children or somebody who knows him. Just these are all youngsters who are studying for the exam. They need to be nourished. So as long as there is food in the kitty, he would go and distribute this to people. And he never had any great striving to accomplish some big goal. He says, R.A.K. was a Vedantin in the true sense of the word. He neither felt the urge that he had to do something, nor did he have the obstinacy to accomplish anything. Whatever work comes, whenever any work comes, I will execute it well. And I will do it on the spot. Is that not sufficient? This was the attitude that R.A.K. had. And Asuri Anandalvar was a very traditional Sri Vaishnava. But when 1909 or 1910, when there was a statue of Adi Shankaracharya established in Kaladi, he wrote a beautiful series of poems on various topics. We can see his generosity in his outlook. He writes about Saraswati, he writes about Chandramolishwara Stuti, Ratnagarbha Ganapati, then Shankaracharya Stuti, and so on. So he writes about Sringeri, about the Sringeri Swamiji. So the DVG writes, those who are disturbed by the present day strife between the Shaivas and Vaishnavas and the furor caused by the Dvaita Advaita disputes may find some solace if they recall the magnanimity displayed by Ananda Alvar. And DVG so beautifully says, the validity of Advaita or Dvaita or Vishishta Dvaita is not outside of the worshipper but inside him, in his way of life, in his experience. Therefore, intolerance towards other sects brings no prestige to truth. See the magnanimity of vision that DVG has. And this is a reflection of the society of that time. That's also something we recognize when we look at this. And later, like I said, Ananda Alvar became the Jiyar or the Mathadipati of the Yadugiri Yatiraja Matha, which even now which is there in Malleshwaram. And one of the friends of DVG, Lingana Somayaji, he was having a conversation and he told Ananda Alvar, is it not ordained that one should avoid kavya? Kavya lapamscha varjayet. It's one of the maxims of the Mimamsakas. And how can a person like you are supposed to be a Mathadipati or an ascetic, how can you have such a desire for rasa? Then he quotes the Veda, raso vaisaha rasagam yevaham. So he says the form of Ishvara is rasa. Bliss is derived only through experiencing rasa. So like this you can see the kind of magnanimity and openness from all these episodes. Then when we look at the past, there are so many people who have led a very obscure life, who are not known outside of the limited circle, but what we can learn from them is very, very great. One such example is that of Natti Shastri, whose name was Venkateramana Shastri, but because he used to stammer, he was called Natti Shastri. Now, these days there is so much of hue and cry about pointing out the defect in somebody. That's what DVG says. Natti Shastri or stammering scholar, this appellation was merely for the convenience of identification, not ridicule. Everyone had reverence-filled affection and respect for Shastri. So nowadays if you say somebody is tall or short or fat, they get offended. But it is very natural and normal to identify somebody based on their external traits. In fact, all through our schooling, it was so common for us to call our friends as Dadiya or Kulla or something. If he's balding early, he was called Bondly. These are all very natural and it is very endearing. Nobody would take offense or nobody would think that this person is my enemy. But when this society becomes overly sensitive about some of these things, it loses naturalness and genuine discussion cannot happen. Once there is no naturalness, then there is already some kind of distance created between people. And when there is a distance, emotional distance between people, then real interaction and we will not get the full juice of the interaction and discussion with such people. And so he talks about Natti Shastri, who used to stammer, so it would take quite some time for him to pronounce a word. So he would have a stick and he would poke the student if he made a mistake. So that poking was just to say that you are not doing it right. So he would poke till the person recited correctly. And this prodding will continue until the student gets the right kind of pronunciation. And DVG writes, even if he didn't have the stammering impairment, it appears he would follow the same method of instruction because he found it to be very effective. And here DVG writes beautifully, the teachers of yore weren't afflicted with the madness of the new method, which wants to make the job of the students easy. The student had to labor on his own. His fruit was proportional to his effort. This was the philosophical attitude of the ancients. Now they want to make everything easy. Oh, it's going to be so difficult. They can't pronounce Mahaprana. They can't learn if it is a difficult word. So we'll replace all the difficult words with easy words. We will not teach them 3 languages. We will teach them 1 language. And trying to make it easier, it is actually spoiling the education. And this problem of trying to make it, this fad of trying to make it easier is not new, like we see in DVG. And here, this is something very beautiful. This one paragraph, so nicely he describes. He says, knowledge is something that resides within the student. The task of the teacher is only to remove the walls that enclose and block its light. If he does just this, the light of the lamp therein will spread out on its own. Knowledge is not something to be shoved in from the outside. It is to be called out from within. This is the work of the teacher. It's because Venkatrama Shastri adhered to this precept that the learning of his disciples in literature and grammar was spotless and accurate. Because he realized that knowledge is within, it has to be brought out. It is not by making it easy. Unless you learn to chew, your teeth will not become strong. If everything is crushed and made into like a sorbet or like a smoothie, how will the teeth of the child develop? Then also, Venkatrama Shastri was a very, very ardent devotee of Sri Rama. So he would conduct every year on the day of Ramanavami and Rama Pattabhisheka, he would organize a huge feast, and people would give him some food items, some ingredients, and he would collect everything. And after everybody has had their meal, he would say, "This is there is an old umbrella. The stick is broken. If somebody wants it, they may take it." He will say, Sri Ramarpana. Or some other years, half a packet of leaf bowls are remaining. So whatever was collected for that, he would ensure that everything is distributed the very same day. And there is a very poignant episode. Once when Nati Shastri's had prepared and got all these items from different people, his wife had broken a small piece of jaggery and fed it to the children. Nati Shastri saw this and he was furious. He said, "What is this? Can we take something which has been obtained by begging for the specific purpose of offering to Sri Rama for our personal use?" And then his wife, poor lady, you can imagine her plight. She says, "You have never committed the sin of placing a single paisa in your children's hands. Neither have you even given a scrap of food to them. What did you lose if I give my children a bit from what others have given you? Aren't the children akin to God?" And Shastri says, "So only your grandchildren are akin to God? What about all these other children?" He points out to some 10-15 children. "What about these children?" And there is some heated exchange. And Shastri says, "Your tongue has become abrasive of late. I don't need you to cook for me and take care of me from now on." And from that day, DVG says, he does Swayampaka. He cooks for himself. So the kind of mentality of the people of that time, where they were so strict about what was given that we should not appropriate it. It is not something very wrong that his wife had done, but that's the level of integrity that some people had. And even today there are people like that. And DVG writes, he didn't feel the need for anything. He was content with his crumbling house and his tattered dhoti. It was an uncelebrated, unknown and obscure life. Is there anybody in today's world who desires such uncelebrated contentment? Indeed, for today's people, Shastri's life history will sound like a tale of arid madness. In fact, this particular trait of contentment is a very defining feature of our culture and ethos. If recently I was looking at some of the articles written by S.R. Ramaswamy sir on economics, and the underlying theme again and again we see the difference between the Western libertarian way of looking at economics, the American model or the Chicago School of Economics, versus the Swadeshi Swadeshi way of looking at it, is that there it is purely demand and supply. There is no place for the idea of contentment or to reduce our consumption. It is purely based on market demand and market supply. So it is completely driven by the kama and artha. But here in India, the aspect of dharma which balances these two, one of the very important thing is contentment. And again we see so many episodes where with very little people are so happy and content. In some sense we find that these are the really rich people because they need very little to be happy. Because ultimately we want money or materials so that we can fulfill our desires and be happy. But if you are able to fulfill your desires with very little, then are you not a richer person? And in the same light, we see another extraordinary character, Shiva Pichai Mudalayar. Now, the story starts with DVG trying to repair a house, the door of a house. And the contractor, he says, don't worry, we'll remove the door and we will set it, put it back. And it turns out that the door is not fitting in the frame. And suddenly he sees an elderly person standing on the other side of the street watching all this exchange. And he says, you are Pichai Mudalayar. He says, how do you recognize me? It's been a long time. Yes, it is you, right? And then he says, it wasn't easy for me to recognize, but I recognize you. Can you come and have a look at this door? And he comes and from standing on the other side of the street with one glance, he has already identified what is the problem, what is the solution. He is so good. He's a mason. He's so good. And he says, I want a piece of thread, and he measures it and says, you must remove this. And he gives a solution. And after that, it is done. Now, this Shiva Pichai Mudalayar, nobody knows his name. Mudalayar is a community from Tamil Nadu. And Shiva Pichai is basically alms given by Shiva. So his name is not known. He came under the influence of a very great sadhu called Vakulabharana Paradeshi of Alsur. And here Paradeshi can mean somebody from another land, a foreigner. Also Paradeshi can mean somebody from a higher realm. So he was a disciple of Vakulabharana Paradeshi. And he was a person of exceptional skill. Whether any aspect of building a house, he knew. He knew it inside out. But what happened, unfortunately, was he lost his family in the plague. And whatever lands and house he had, he sold everything, gave it off to his sister. And with 15 rupees in his pocket and all his equipment for masonry, he just left the house. And of course, 15 rupees is a lot of money in those days. Probably you can say it's equal to about 10,000 rupees today or 15,000 rupees today. But he took this money and he would go. And his program, DVG says, his program was he would travel to different pilgrimage centers, Tirtha-kshetras. And he will go and visit Rameshwaram, Kashi, Madurai. And the moment he exhausts his funds, he will go and see if there is some house construction going on. He says, do you want a daily labor? I will work. So he will work for them and earn some more money and then continue. Once his pocket is full, again he will go to different places and visit Tirtha-kshetras. So he had visited Prayaga, Puri, Pandrapura, Kanchipuram, Tirupati, several places. And whenever he used to work, he will come exactly at the time decided the previous evening. If the DVG says, if there is no clock in the town, you can set your watch by the time Pichai Mudalayar comes. Then when it is lunchtime, he will work till lunchtime without a break. He will go quietly under some tree, walk a few furlongs near some temple or a tree and peacefully eat his lunch in solitude. And DVG would say, why do you want to go all the way there? Come and sit here. And he says, no, I want to keep some space for myself and eat. And in the evening, once he finishes the work, once it is time, he will stop. He will not work for one moment more. But nobody will say anything. That's what DVG says. Isn't it but natural for us to develop admiration and respect for a person who works without a tinge of dishonesty and with remarkable skill? So when he is following the rules to the last letter, people around him also respected that. And he needed very, very few things. He work, his labor, then his food, he will go sit in the garden, and that's all he wanted. Then he will go travel around these places. And once there is a very nice episode. He was building a house, and he says if somebody wants to do a threshold puja, they can come. Then the owner of the house says, of course we will do it, sir. What are you saying? He says, I don't know, because nowadays things have changed. People don't use Arshana Kunkuma. Everybody is become so fancy. So I don't know. That's why I told you. If you want, I can do it, because I have learnt all this thing. I can do it. And the family is very embarrassed. They say, no, we will do it. And some girls come and they do that. And he says, this is very good. And after this whole episode, when D.V. Gundappa asks him, where are you going next from here? He says, to the place where the Almighty takes me. And then DVG writes in the end, to me that experience was greater than whatever I had gained from reading books. I can never forget it. Because an interaction with a noble person like this is something which we cannot explain. Words have only so much of power, and experience has so much more. And with this sort of simplicity and contentment, anybody will be amazed. Because on the one hand, we have great integrity, and on the other hand, we have exceptional skill and contentment, because it's so rare to find all these qualities in one person. There are people who are very skilled, but they are very ambitious, very greedy. They want to earn and do a lot of things. Then there are some people who are very noble, but they are so incompetent that we cannot work with them. And then there are people who are competent and also who are honest, but they don't have contentment. So like this, to find all the combination in a common person, this is not a very highly educated person in the way we look at it. It's a common, he's a mason. But that is the high level that Pichai Mudaliar had. Then we come to another extraordinary individual, Dr. Gundanna. Gundanna is a kind of a pet name. His real name was S.R. Narasimharaja. And this person died in 1938, so close to 80 years back. But the DVG says, remembering him wasn't limited to occasions when people grew sick, but during all instances of human interest when one usually thinks of a close friend. It is true indeed that he was a popular medical practitioner. He had earned great reputation in his chosen profession. However, his presence is commemorated to this day largely due to his human goodness. In fact, yesterday after the lecture, I was speaking to Dr. Ganesh, and he told me that Dr. Gundanna's grandson had met him somewhere on the street of Baswangudi, and also sent some savories for Gokulashtami, and narrated some of the episodes from his life. So somebody who is living in our neighborhood about 80 years ago, who had such fantastic qualities, the DVG says, affability, sense of humor, love for literature, and benevolence. And Gundanna was particularly known for his method of diagnosis. In fact, when this translation appeared few years ago on Preksha, one of my good friends, Dr. Krishna, who is an Ayurvedic doctor, he had prepared a list of books which are related to Ayurveda. He had called it Ayurveda book list. It is still there on Preksha. But when he read this English translation, immediately he added this also to that Ayurveda book list. He said a doctor has to read this episode because they will understand the methodology that Gundanna used to diagnose a particular problem. So DVG goes to Gundanna once. He used to have a Reliance clinic, and he says, not only patients, there will be a lot of people who will just come to listen to Gundanna's jokes and banter. So he had gone there at about 3 o'clock every afternoon. DVG would develop a severe stomach pain. So he had gone to find out what is the reason for it. And Gundanna was just telling jokes, and he spent 1 hour, 2 hours, it's 3 hours, and he has not a word to say about DVG's ailment. He says, what are you doing? I have to observe your mannerisms, the kind of how your stomach cramps, what is happening, where it is paining, how your mukha cheshte I have to see. And after all this thing, he drags DVG and another friend of his, we will come to him later, Narada. He takes Narada and DVG, goes to his house, and they have a fantastic meal. And after the meal, he says, I'm going to have a nap. And DVG says, I'm not used to sleeping in the afternoon. He says, you can go and die. I don't care. I'm going to have a nap. And then DVG says, by the time it was, the usual time to have the stomach cramps, but nothing happened. And he said, what about my medicine? It's already been administered in your food. Don't worry. And he says, after that, I never had that stomach cramp. I don't know what is the reason, whether it is his affection, whether it is a kind of medication. I don't know what it is, but he never had that problem. And his treatment method, the way he would understand, almost like in a courtroom, how the different lawyers will make arguments and the judge will examine both the sides of the story. Like this, he would very, very methodically listen to the patient, spend time with them, and understand the overall nature of the problem. That's why a lot of top class graduates would be hanging around with him to learn his subtle method of diagnosis. And then there is one very interesting episode where this a Muslim gentleman comes to him and speaks to him in Urdu. He says, unbearable pain, unbearable pain. He says, where? And he points to his middle finger, left hand middle finger, unbearable pain. So what is the problem, sir? Show it to me. I will. It's evening already. He puts on the electric lamp. He says, I can't see very clearly. You come back tomorrow. He said, I can't come tomorrow. I'm already dying. It's not possible for me to come. I have to go somewhere and everything. So I have to go by tomorrow morning train. He says, then you have to shove it up your ass. Everybody starts laughing. And he says, what is this, Dr. Gundana? I've been coming to you for so many years. Is this how you humiliate me? What is this? He says, these are all stupid fellows, sir. You think they understand what I am saying. Basically, the problem is what you have is a small growth on your finger. It requires heat, moisture and pressure. And that is the only place right now where you will find it. So he also starts laughing. He says, okay, I will change my plan. I will come in the morning. He says, okay, you put some heated poultice and come back tomorrow. So like this, he's, the nature of Gundana was to make everything so relaxed. And even the way DVG describes so well, the kind of family life he had, the kind of joint family, and he would get everybody to share whatever dishes were made. And everybody would eat together. Although they were all in neighbors and cooking in different kitchens, they would all bring the lunch together, and he would have some nicknames for all the members of the household. So with whatever we have, we can make our lives exciting and memorable. It is not, we don't need some special thing from outside to make our life exciting. And one of the friends of Gundana was a person called Amrutur Srinivasa Iyengar, who was known as Narada. As we know, Narada often is a name given to people who do this kind of mischief. And sometimes I feel it's unfortunate because Narada is a very great character from our Puranas. And the only aspect we have seen is that trying to make a mess of things and carry tales from one person to the other. But we sometimes forget that actually he is doing it for a larger good. And he is a person who gives wise counsel at the right time to so many people. So in that sense, this Amrutur Srinivasa Iyengar being called Narada is used in all the senses of the word, I suppose. And he would, when he sees there is some family, and he would try and he will create some galata in that. And then after a few days, he will go there and set it right. And once he was from a place called Amrutur, which is well known for carpets and mats. So once DVG asked him to send some good quality floor mat. He wants one good quality floor mat from Amrutur. So what Narada does is sends him 6. He says, small checked mat for your father to sit on during his parayana. Regular mat for your mother to use when she sits in her sanctified clothes, waiting for you till 2 in the afternoon in anticipation of serving you lunch. And then a 2 feet wide long mat for your wife to rest during her monthlies. Large colored mat for you and your friends to ease on while munching hurigadu, kodbade and other snacks. So this kind of thing, when he asked for one floor mat, he has sent so many. And also, whenever Gundana had any serious question, he would consult Narada. And in this episode, DVG talks about the establishment of the Bengaluru Medical College. And when that was being established, Gundana tells DVG, because DVG was involved in the committee, he says professors in medical college have to be well acquainted in literature in addition to being good medical practitioners themselves. This is Gundana's words. It is worthless for a person to hold a degree in medicine without familiarizing oneself with literature, at least till the BA level. Because what do we get from literature? We understand human mind. We understand the nature of people. And when we want to cure a disease, it is not just curing something in the body. Body and mind is one unit. So when we understand the nature of people, when we understand how the mind affects the body in a holistic way, then we can be far better in prescribing some medicines. So Gundana was very, very well versed in English literature, Kannada literature, and he would always carry a book with him. Whenever he has free time, he would read some work of literature. And the kind of fun and enjoyment that people like Gundana and Narada had, it is something which is so easy for everybody. All we need is the right attitude. And he says, Amrutur Srinivas Iyengar was a highly compassionate and benevolent person. Not a thought of immorality surfaced near him. Places graced by the presence of such venerable, noble, and wise beings witness nothing but prosperity. There is no room for faint-heartedness in places where people like Gundana and Narada are available to stand as support. Evil just can't survive there. Such a beautiful thing that DVG says. So when somebody is having that kind of nobility and light humor and willingness to help, then where is the possibility of evil or something petty being there? Then talking about Rai Bahadur Arcot Srinivasacharya, there is a very interesting episode where Srinivasacharya used to visit Bangalore every now and then, and he would arrange for music concerts in his house every evening. But this was a very, very specific style of conducting these baitaks. He would invite some very well-known musicians. There was one tambura in his house which had to be tuned perfectly. They would come, they would be given some refreshments. They had to sing some few ragas, not more than 15 minutes. Because if you just elaborate it, keep on going on and on, sometimes it gets boring. So the crux of the raga, so the best portions of 2 or 3 kritis in a matter of about 45 minutes to the amount of attention span. Because sometimes people will sing 3 hours, 4 hours, but half the time people may be bored and they might be asleep. So identifying the best portions of the raga, presenting it in a crisp manner about 10-15 minutes, and 2 or 3 compositions with a little bit of Neraval, little bit of Swarakalpana, and in a manner as to capture the cream of the music. So this is very interesting, and all the musicians, they never got offended by it because they realized what is the intention. Because not everybody has the potential to sit and listen to a 3-hour musical concert, especially if it is a heavy classical music. Unless you have some training in it, or unless you have years have had some samskara, it's not very easy. It becomes like a punishment. Whereas here, he has got the best portion. In fact, it reminds me of how Vishveshwaraya used to eat the central portion of Vobbattu. He will not have the entire Vobbattu. He used to call it the national delicacy and eat the central portion of the, where the Hurna is there, because that's the best portion of the Vobbattu. So like that, he used to conduct this concert, and 2 or 3 kritis, and all the musicians would adhere to this rule. Srinivasacharya would be walking around, and he will felicitate them at the end of the thing. And in the end, DVG says very nice thing about Srinivasacharya. I have met him only 3 or 4 times. Each time the room in which I met him had heaps of fresh jasmine buds on a big plate. Such is my memory of him. So the sweetness and the fragrance, even though we may meet somebody once or twice, we carry that warmth and that good memory. In fact, like Maya Angelou, the famous African American poetess, she said, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you do, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So these are the people that in DVG's life who have made such an impact that he recalls them. And then he goes on to talk about a few public institutions and how different people, whether it is K.S. Krishna Iyer or K.T. Appanna, the K.S. Krishna Iyer, the Irish press, and K.T. Appanna started the hotel industry in Bangalore. And there's a book club started by Balasundaram Iyer and so on. So this gives a very nice view of how the socio-cultural landscape of old Bangalore was. And in this episode, there is a very nice segment where he says, in a country or among a people, there should never be a situation where a group of persons or a section of society feels inadequate or lowly, thinking we are backward in comparison with the rest. In any society, if there is a circumstance where one of its segments feel that it has not received justice because of the rest, then that inadequacy will become perilous to the society either at that time or prepare the ground for future danger. So in this manner, in a beautiful way, he talks about the good intentions of the Prajamitra Mandali, which was kind of the equivalent of the Justice Party which started in Tamil Nadu, which wanted to fight for rights for people from backward community. So here DVG identifies the nobility of the goal, that nobody should feel left out, nobody should feel that they are lowly in comparison to the rest of the society. However, DVG says, a thriving population shouldn't be pulled back in a haste to drive the weaker sections forward. This is an equally important precondition. So while DVG had so much of affection and friendship with people of the Justice, who are the founders of the Justice Party and the Prajamitra Mandali, he was very clear to identify that they lacked the vision of a comprehensive society. He knew that their intentions were good, but what they were proposing, what they were doing, was not in the interest of the larger society. It was reactionary. So just this one small section, which is about a couple of pages, you can see his mindset. So one need not be disrespectful. At the same time, we have to be very sharp in identifying the good and bad. Then he talks about Untitled-Chapter-shaale, who comes one day into Lakshminarayan's house, and when everybody is sleeping, there is some conference and everybody is sleeping, he goes secretly and drops some kodbade or bhaji, something in everybody's mouth. So suddenly they wake up, and what's happening? Then in the middle of, it's 11 o'clock in the night, everybody's gone to sleep, and suddenly they find themselves having some kodbade or bhaji or ponda in their mouth. Everybody wake up, and then through the night they have a wonderful discussion, and they talk about all their romantic escapades and everything. And the next day DVG says, I was in the neighborhood, you should have told me. There was a discussion to, among the people whether to call you, but you are little bit of a prude, solpa madi nenige, so better not to involve you. So that's why we didn't call you. So this kind of fun episodes also we find so many of them. And then he talks about that period of time where there was the Mysore party and the Madras party. One of them was where Mysore is for Mysoreans, and whereas the Madras party was Mysore is for everybody and anybody can come. And one of the prominent members of this Mysore party was Advocate D. Venkatramaya. And at that point of time, DVG and some of his friends had a craze to celebrate the birthdays of Deshabhaktas. So he wanted to celebrate Ranade's birthday. So he goes to meet Venkatramaya. But the way in which he's dressed, he goes to Venkatramaya and he was wearing some kind of a kurta and some sort of a very loose kache panche, and he's wearing a turban in the style of a Punjabi. And Venkatramaya says, where do you come from? He says, I am from Mysore. He says, then your name appears like you are from here, but we can't know the identity just by the name. Do you speak Kannada? He says, yes, I speak Kannada. He replies in Kannada. Then he says, do you have any relatives in Bangalore? And he says, Munsif Lakshminarayana is my relative. He says, okay, what do you want? And he explains that he wants to invite him for a celebration of Ranade's birthday. He says, I'll get back to you. Let me think about it. And then he goes to meet his relative, Munsif Lakshminarayana. And the first thing he says, what is wrong with you? You are dressed like this. Don't you know this is the freedom struggle is going on, and there are a lot of revolutionaries from Punjab who are come and they are hiding here. Then a lot of the police also are in hunt of these kind of people. They are also in Mufti. If you go dressed like this, then what will he? He got scared that you might be some revolutionary. So then now I have explained to him, go dressed in a decent way. And of course when he goes there and he becomes friends with Venkatramaya, and he has a long association with him. And Venkatramaya was the kind of person who was very patient. He never rushed into decisions. He never broke his relationship with anybody. But this didn't mean that he would just blindly agree with anyone. He had philosophical clarity. He stuck to his ground. But his adherence, his allegiance to truth was never severe and violent, DVG writes. So we can be honest, we can have integrity, but there is no need to have crudeness or violence in our behavior. And finally, in the first volume, he concludes with the history of the Abalashrama, which is in Basavangudi. And he talks about how ICS officer of that period, Isaac Pitt, and his wife, they became very friendly with an advocate from Penukonda, Shivashankaram. And some 3,000 rupees that Mrs. Pitt had from her husband's pension, she gave it as a seed fund for Abalashrama, and that's how it was created. So like this, we find not only the story of several individuals, but also some of the very, very important institutions in Bangalore and old Mysore. So with this, we come to the end of the first volume. The second volume onwards until the fifth volume, it is all about a set of people. The second volume is Kalopasakaru, artist luminaries. The third volume is all about literators. Fourth volume is about the Divans of Mysore, and the fifth is Vaidika Sampradayastharu. Then again in the sixth, seventh and eighth, we have a very nice mix of people from different backgrounds. And like with the first volume, here also D.V. Gundappa has a beautiful introduction to dance and music, and he writes how that he has listened to so many musicians, seen so many dancers, but selected only a few of them to discuss in these pages because it is not possible for him. For example, he was very close to M.S. Subbulakshmi and Sadashivam. Every time M.S. Amma would come to Bangalore, she would insist on meeting DVG, and he would give guidance on certain intricate details of Tyagaraja Kritis and so on. So like this, he knew the who's who of the music world also, but he has chosen few people to write about. And he says that there is a limitation of language, because the experience you have when you listen to a music concert, that is something that cannot be described. And however good a literator you are, you cannot recreate that experience using words, because it is an experience. And he writes, words are external, experiences are internal. So it is very difficult to recreate that. And there is one section almost at the end of the introduction where he says, Kala Jeeviya Siddhi Antarangaddu. It's very difficult to translate this. So Kala Jeevi is a kind of artistic soul, an artist, a great artist. The Siddhi, the accomplishment or what is attained, the fulfillment of an artist is Antarangaddu. It is something to do with the inner landscape, to do with the inner world. So the accomplishment is not something that comes from outside. It is something that comes from within. And he says, if this being the case, what have I attempted in these pages? These are merely rough sketches or outlines in the copy books that are meant for children to learn writings of the alphabet, letters of the alphabet. The exterior forms of the letters are indicated by means of dots and dashes. The child has to fill up the spaces to write the letter. So art tutors also use a similar method to teach sketching. So this, he says, whatever is there in these pages is a rough sketch. It cannot recreate that experience that one has listening to the musician or watching the dancer. And he talks about, in the first, right at the beginning, he talks about the respectability of the art of dance. Now earlier, dance was patronized in temples. There was the very, very flourishing Devadasi tradition. And that had both good and bad. There was a huge anti-Nach movement at that point of time because there was a sort of degeneration of that institution. But in the olden days, there was a rigorous training of the Devadasis. They learned Sanskrit, they learned the local languages, they learned to versify in Chandas, they learned music, they learned dance. So they were almost equal to any scholar. And writing about these, he starts off by writing about certain art forms. He says that the primary means by which one perceives the world and lets himself be perceived are manas and buddhi, mind and the intellect. And rigorous training in the arts strengthen the mind through samskara, while the intellect acquires strengthening through samskara by deep knowledge of the Shastras. So there is an aspect of listening and intuitive learning, and also learning the Shastras which give the grammar of music or dance or painting. And he says, art evokes the soft and tender emotions of the heart and gives it a form. It helps us in sculpting our behavior and conduct, making them more subtle and nuanced. So the ultimate idea of art is to refine ourselves, self-refinement, self-elevation. And primarily there are four forms of art, he says: kavya, which is poetry, literature; sangeeta, music; natya, drama and dance; and chitra-shilpa, so drawing, painting, sculpture, these kind of things. And the sweep of DVG can be seen where he talks about the Greek courtesans and the traditional the idea of Vaishyas and how Dasharatha brings Rishyashringa and so on. And the temples those days, unfortunately, what had happened is that the people, instead of going to the main Garbhagudi, they were more interested in the Devadasis. And there will be a large congregation near the Devadasis rather in the main temple. So, in a bid to change this, people like Arcot Srinivasacharya, who was one of the founders of the Mujarai department, they tried to change this. But what happened was that the negative problems, the issues like prostitution did not come down, but dance was affected. That's what DVG says. And he writes, the inherent fickle-mindedness of man caused a blemish to this ancient clan of dancers. Without considering the legacy of dance, some nationalists caused a disaster to the profession of dance during the initial years of the 20th century. And funnily, DVG also was one of them. Initially, he was also opposed to the Devadasi movement. He had tied some thread to show his protest. And a lot of people, in fact, some of the people opposing the Devadasi movement were well-known Devadasis themselves. And there was a lot of opposition to it. But it did not end up solving the problem, it just ended up weakening that art form. So there is an interesting story once where there is a concert arranged in a big mansion in KR Road in Baswangudi, and DVG had gone to attend that concert. He was sitting outside. It was on a Sunday evening, he says. Many people had accomplished there. So he was sitting on the northern side of the house outside. So K. Krishnaswamy Iyer came there. He says, why are you sitting here? He says, I am here because I want to listen to the music. Why don't you come inside? Why are you sitting here? No, I am anti-dance. I have taken a vow and I have tied this thread. So then Krishnaswamy Iyer just dragged him and said, just come with me. And he said, you can close your eyes. Come, we will go inside. And he says, that was a prayaschitta for having an inappropriate vow. And I was glad that somebody dragged me inside and had an opportunity to go inside. And he says that, prostitution did not stop, but the art of dance weakened considerably. If prostitution has been abolished, I am not aware of that. The impoverishment of the art of Natya is indubitable. I don't know if that has gone, but this is definitely, it has come down. And he says, when many years later, he goes to some elderly dancer. He says, Amma, it's been many years since I watched a good tafa. Tafa is like a Devadasi who used to do that traditional dance. Is there anybody who can perform in a traditional manner? If there is somebody, I would like to see, because I really want to see tafa of the earlier times. And she says, all that has disappeared now. These days, it is only Akash and Artana. It is aerial dancing. Everybody is jumping and doing all sorts of things. There is no good tafa. So, for this, whether it is a traditional dance or a music, it is very important to have some amount of leisure. Unless we are able to disconnect from our daily life and spend time to enjoy, whether it's a music concert or a painting or a dance or a work of literature, it is not possible. In fact, there is a famous musician, Sripada Pinakapani, was a guru of Voleti Venkateshwarlu. He once said, how can you dance when you are running? So if you are running, you cannot dance. If everybody now, there's a speed of playing instrument or singing. They are more focus on speed rather than savoring something. It is more pradarshana than aswadana. Then he talks about some of the distinguished dancers of that era and how there were so many notable dancers even in his town of Mudubagalu. And it's very interesting, he talking about one Venkata Lakshmasani. He says she sang and performed Abhinava. Those days they used to sing and also perform Abhinava. Nowadays, if you see, they will have a live music and somebody else is singing. they are performing Abhinaya and giving the expression. So almost Abhinaya is a kind of elaboration of an idea. Whereas those days they will sing and they will perform Abhinaya. And she used to perform Abhinaya for various classical compositions, including Jayadeva Ashtapadis and Krishna Karnamrita. So there are so many wonderful Sanskrit compositions, which unfortunately many of the dancers today don't seem to value. But those days, a person from a small town in Mudabaglu was able to appreciate and perform Abhinaya for these kind of classical works. There is one episode where he talks about Abhinaya done by one of the dancers for a line from the Jayadeva Ashtapadi. Yahi Madhava Yahi Keshava Ma Vada Kaitava Vadam. So here he says Yahi means go. Yahi. So what is the real meaning? And in a typical DVG style he analyzes. He says this is an aspect that experienced Rasikas will know. There are so many different flavors for the meaning of Yahi. Go can mean go far away, don't come near me, go. Or go means go away, I am very hurt, go away, don't come near me. Go can also mean go away, you are a very bad person, you are very evil, go away. Go can also mean don't go. So this multiple flavors for one word Yahi is performed through Abhinaya by a very good dancer. And he talks about the very well-known Bengaluru Nagaratnamma, who is the person who is responsible for setting up the Tyagaraja Samadhi in Tiruvayyaru. And you can see again the kind of approach that DVG has. He says Bengaluru Nagaratnamma belonged to the old Mysore region. There is another person by the same name, but she hails from Kolar. She is called Kolar Nagaratnamma. Her mother was Nanjunda Sani. So like this, he says, don't get confused. There are other somebody like this. So this, the main story will be about somebody, but as a passing reference, so many other people who are either related to that profession or related to the person, they come inside. So although there are some 200 odd episodes in the 8 volumes, the number of people who have been alluded to would probably be more than 400. And Nagaratnamma learnt under Asthana Vidwan Kavi Giribhatta Tammayya, and she was taught classical Sanskrit literature. She knew singing, and she had put a lot of efforts to learn Kannada, DVG says. And there is a very interesting episode of a High Court judge, Narahari Rao, who became attracted to Bengaluru Nagaratnamma. And this High Court judge, he wanted to create a separate house for her so he could go every evening and listen to her music. And he approaches his wife. He says, I have a request. I don't know how you are going to take this, but I have taken a liking for Nagaratnamma's music and I want to listen to her often. So I want to create a place and go there regularly. So if it is not agreeable to you, you tell me, I will drop my desire, I will not go ahead. So she says, my wish is to keep your desires fulfilled. Then he says, I will ensure that you will not be under any trouble with this arrangement. And his wife says, why will it cause any trouble? You have done everything that is needed to run the family. Children are grown up, they are self-reliant, daughters have been married off, sons are well educated. You have the freedom to be happy in whatever manner you want. Just see the kind of magnanimity of this lady. So she gave the approval. So that is where this Narahari Raya Gudda, Mount Joy, that is named after Narahari Rao. And one day what happened was, at that point of time, the Diwan was K. Sheshadri Iyer. So Diwan has come to the house. Diwan, like I told you yesterday, is almost like a chief minister of the state. So Diwan K. Sheshadri Iyer has come to Narahari Rao's house. So obviously he's a little scared. Why some chief minister comes to your house, what will you feel? He says, I know I am, being presumptuous and I should not be poking my nose in your personal affairs. You have every right to do whatever you want. But one request is, when you are coming back from the court, when you are going towards Nagaratnamma's house, that stick which is there, next to you, ask your driver to keep that inside, because that stick, people might get an impression that that stick represents a position of power. So somebody who is worthy and powerful is going to a place like this, people may get the wrong idea. So ask him to keep that inside so that it is not seen. So you see how subtly the divan of the kingdom comes and tells him, you should not give a wrong impression to other people. And Nagaratnamma, like I said, is very well known because she spent all her savings, all her money, and she raised a lot of funds so that she can build the temple in Tiruvayar and the memorial to Tyagaraja. So many people have been singing Tyagaraja Kritis. So many people have had entire careers. They have made their life, their money, their fame, everything because of Tyagaraja. But it was Nagaratnamma who felt that gratitude towards him and said that she will spend the last penny she has in order to build a memorial for Tyagaraja. Then DVG talks about some of the violinists of Mulabagalu, and when he was growing up, they were really well known. And many years later, he goes in search of some of the family members of these great violinists like Setu Madhav Rao and Madhavaya, Ramachandraya, all these people. Ramachandraya, who was a classmate of K. Krishnaswamy Iyer when he was learning violin. And so he went to the place. He says, Venkatappa's Nagaswara playing his violin performance, have the next generation, have you retained even a little bit of this? Have you learnt from your ancestors? And they say, who will listen to all this today? So DVG says, why do you say that? There are so many wealthy people, there will be some weddings and some upanayana, some other ceremonies will be happening. So there is always a need for good Nagaswara and violin and all this. So then the descendants of these great violinists, they say, sir, what they prefer is Western style band music, the brass beats of the kettle drums. If we don't adapt to that, we can't survive. These days what people need is sound and not music. And DVG says, our modern generation verily deserves this misfortune. Then talking about Mulabagalu, which is his hometown, native town, he talks about a Gattanagari Munaswami Achar. He was a goldsmith, and his shop was the adda for all the connoisseurs of Mulabagalu to come together. So people from different walks of life would hang out at that Munaswami shop. And every morning it will start by around 7:30 or 8. Then it will go on till about 11 or 11:30. Then again from 2:30 in the afternoon till it became dark. And DVG writes, Vaidikas, scholars, teachers, musicians, unemployed persons, and those who were there for a leisurely talk, all of them were part of this gathering. So they would discuss the previous day. There might have been a Harikatha performance or a music concert or some dance program, or there will be some galata in some agrahara or some discussion in the school, or it could be a philosophical discussion, a critique on religion, or the dangers of religious conversion. So many topics, all these things they would discuss. And Munaswami was not a very talkative person. Although he was the host, he would be more silent, listening, and he will try to summarize what other people said. He would make people laugh. So then he talks about how there was a debate between a Christian pastor and somebody else about Jesus and Krishna, and he says it was pure Vitandavada. So just complete nonsense. There was totally no logical discourse, just some Vitandavada, and everybody had a great laugh about it for a long time. And Munaswami also was a very good mridangam player. He used to play mridanga. He also liked tabla a lot. And he had one Sita Ramaya who was his disciple. So if anything, if Sita Ramaya makes a mistake, he will get a slap on his back. And he was also a Vagyekara. He has composed some songs. And he has written some song, Bham Bham Shambho Mahadeva, Shambho Shambho Mahadeva. So DVG was like, what is this Bham Bham? So he says, fool, is it not the sound that emanates from a conch? Bringi and other Shivaganas will be blowing the conch to worship him. So that is where the Bham Bham comes from. And like this, talking about some very childish poem, immediately DVG makes a leap. He says, in the words of a song, that is the lyrics, there are typically two kinds of emotions. Akshara bhava, emotion of the letter at the level of sound, and Artha bhava, emotion of the word, that is at the level of sense. So you can see from some general song which is composed by this guy in his village, he goes into a higher level of understanding, like, and he gives a sort of justification for why he has composed in that manner. So this is a very typical trait of DVG. He gives a beautiful philosophical covering, philosophical insight into some of the episodes. And then he talks about some of the Harikatha Vidwans, and one of them was Achyuta Dasa. Achyuta Dasa was also teaching as a music teacher. He was a singing master, those days it was called, a music teacher at a girls' high school. And he used to teach with a lot of enthusiasm, but because of so many other responsibilities, it would not be possible for him to stick to the schedules. So there was always a tiff between him and the headmaster. So once the school inspector was informed, this guy is not coming on time, there is a problem. So the inspector calls Achyuta Dasa. He says, if you fail to adhere to the timetable, then we have to punish you. So then Achyapa says, if you suspend this poor Kadari Dasa, which newspaper or gazette will publish it? At least if you dismiss the senior officials, that will become some news. What is the use of, Kadari Dasa is a servant of Lord Narasimha. Some poor guy like me, harmless man, it will not become news also. And the inspector says, what do you mean? I get a feeling that you are not interested in your work. He says, sir, my life runs because of the Sore Burde. That is the Tambura. It is not because of this immense wealth you are bestowing on me. So, do you think I can throw away my means of livelihood for this great wealth you are giving me month after month? So then by the time there was some consolation happened, and they said, okay, we understand what you are saying. And after some time he resigned the government job and became full-time Harikathakara. And also very nicely DVG gives some examples of some of the prasangas that these Harikathakaras used to tell, the stories, the songs, which often might have got lost in the sands of time, but DVG with his acute memory and his genuine love for these kind of episodes has captured some 4 or 5 stories what they used to narrate in that period of time, which makes for wonderful reading. Then there's an episode of Ramasheshaya, who suddenly, there is a person who lands up at their house and he says, I want some food to eat. And after he goes to have a bath in the river, has some food. And the next day or the same day, there is some music heard from the temple. So late at night, sometime in the middle of the night, there is some music heard. So they thought maybe some ghost or something. You don't know. And continuously 1 or 2 days this kind of music was coming. So then there was a small group of detectives who were put together, and they started Venkatnarayana Bhatta and other people. They went to the temple and they heard somebody was singing. This is a person, there was the Murti was there and some small lamp was lit, and some music was heard. As they went closer, they found, this is like Raga Kedara Gauda. And when they went closer, they realized it was that person who had come to their house. He says, my name is Ramasheshaya. And when inquired as to where he belonged, he said, wherever I live, there. So then DVG immediately recalls the famous dictum from the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Aniketaha sthiramatir bhaktiman me priyo naraha. So a real bhakta doesn't have any fixed place of residence because he feels at home everywhere. He doesn't need his place, his people. He feels at home in anywhere in the world. And many years later, he says he saw Ramasheshaya in Chamrajpet, and when he goes nearby and remembers that he is Ramasheshaya, he gets shocked. He says, how do you know how do you know who I am? He says, because I remember you had come to Mudubagla. And then after speaking to DVG for a few minutes, he disappears. So he says, in the midst of the heat of his family problems, Ramasheshaya had discovered the cool island of music. This is the ultimate accomplishment of music. So he had some difficulties, some other things. He left home, must have gone out. But in music, he found solace. Then there is a beautiful episode on the prestige of the music of Mysore, and the kind of patronage that the Mysore Maharaja and the royal family gave to musicians. And he brings up a very different, very interesting point of discussion. He says, does art of this nature and standard obtain patronage in the era of democracy? Because when those days there was a lot of patronage, because the kings and the rulers, they knew the value of good quality music. Today, whether it is music or dance or any art form, it goes more by popularity than quality because of the democracy. And he says, how many people are there who can truly appreciate an art that is far more elevated than the basic level? And it requires a certain samskara, a certain culturing of the mind to appreciate a high quality of art. And he says, today even those who call themselves educated are under the illusion that gaudy colors and bombastic use of language and loud singing constitutes a high level of art. And also there is a certain commercial mindset, he complains, so which is no different from what some of the people complain today about the change in the nature of art. Then he talks about three Vena Maestros of Mysore. One is the Vena Sambayya, who has a very beautiful moustache, and all the people in the palace, they conspire to ensure that his moustache is shaved off. And he gets so miffed, he just takes his veena and walks away, and he says, I don't need this anymore. And he doesn't even come back to the palace. Then he talks about Veena Sheshanna and how he was so well known that when DVG went to Delhi, some person there said, I have been hearing about Sheshanna, he is so famous, I want to hear his music. And then he talks about Bakshi Subarna, who was another well-known musician. In the Mysore of that era, there were several great musicians, and one of the very prominent ones was Bidaram Krishnappa. His student is T. Chowdaya, Mysore Chowdaya, and Rallapalli Ananta Krishna Sharma. These are some of his students. So you can imagine his what he used to sing. In fact, there is even a recording of Bidaram Krishnappa in a record, the what was called the 45 RPM record, which goes on for 3.5 minutes. He has sung Vatapi Ganapatim, and it was those days it would be at the end of the recording they have to shout their name. So he has sung, when there's only 3.5 minutes. Vatapi Ganapatim is a fairly large composition, so he has sung it at really at a high speed with lesser number of sangatis, and finally he will say Krishnappa Mysore. It's I think you can get it on YouTube also. So you can see what a wonderful tone he had. And although he was so famous, DVG writes in one of the instances, he was roaming around different government offices to get some money to build a temple. So DVG says, why are you taking this train? What will happen to your voice? How can you retain your creativity if you are doing this kind of lowly task? He says, what do I do? Rama has placed this task on my shoulders. He is putting me through all sorts of tests. Let him do so. It will happen how he pleases. So, although these people are so well known, they have attained fame. See, it is one thing for a Shivapiche Mudalayar or a Ramasheshaya to have contentment. But for a person like Bidaram Krishnappa, who has reached the high echelons of fame and name, to have that contentment is something which is very noteworthy. Then there is a very beautiful episode on Mysore Vasudevacharya, which DVG writes in some detail. And there is an interesting episode with Vasudevacharya when he meets him in Mysore. Vasudevacharya is sitting with another elderly gentleman, and DVG goes and meets him, and Vasudevacharya introduces him as, this is my arch rival. He says, do such people really exist? He says, yes. There are such people. He's my arch rival. He says, oh, such cordiality with your enemy. He says, what to do, sir? Circumstances have forced me. He is in a superior position. And he says, this is Dwivedi Gundavadhani. And he is a Vedic scholar. And he talks about how when both of them were students, both of them wanted to take up Veda. And the teacher said, both of you should, they wanted to apply for music. He says, both of you should not apply for music. One can apply for music, one can apply for Vedas. So then you will get some scholarship. Basically, it's a scholarship. And you both cannot take up because then they won't give you. So one person you choose among yourself. But how to choose, because both of these people are hell bent on taking up music. So then he says, I had no background in the Vedas, I had some background in music, and we are friends, there is no need for competition between us. So why you want to do this? You just take up Veda, I will do music. But Gundavadhani did not agree. Says finally what to do? They wrote chits. On one chit it was written Vasudevacharya, one chit it was written Gundavadhani, then one chit it was written Veda and then music. So these were put in two different plates in the Vidya Ganapati temple, and the two chits were picked up. Whatever you get, that is what it's going to be. And it so turns out that Vasudevacharya got music and Gundavadhani got Veda, and because of that he got Gundavadhani got lot of respect and this thing as a Vedic scholar, and therefore Vasudevacharya was pulling his leg. Some of the musicians DVG has written about, we have no record of their singing, we don't know their names also unless we see the Jnapaka-chitra-shaale. One of them is Ananda Shastri. I think he was one of the students of Dakshinamurti Shastri. And Ananda Shastri was very, very powerful singer of those days. And there is a nice episode that DVG narrates. It comes in Krishnaswamy Iyer's story. Also it comes here. One day they are sitting in Krishnaswamy Iyer's house and he says, somehow the mind has been going to Kedaragoda. I've been thinking about Kedaragoda, it's been a long time. So then he says, with your permission, I can sing. So it is not like I want you to sing. It is so subtle. I have a feeling somehow Kedaragoda is haunting me. With your permission, I will start. The moment he says that, somebody from inside, his wife, Krishnaswamy Iyer's wife, says, it is time for evening Sandhya, which also indicates that after Sandhya there will be a dinner. So don't keep your friends hungry. You first finish your dinner, because if your all evening thing starts, it will go on for a long time. So first you have dinner. So they all came, they all had dinner, and after that he started singing. And he sang, I think, some Dikshidhar Kriti, and it was till late in the night, and he said by the time he completed it was almost 11 o'clock. He said, such a divine music, I don't even, the shops will not be open if I want to get you a garland. I would have loved to get you a floral garland, but none of the shops are open. So he goes to the Devaramane and takes a flower which was offered to the Supreme and gives that. He says, what else can I get better than this? This is the best blessing. And similarly, once when the Dakshinamurti, famous singer Dakshinamurti Shastri, there was a wedding in his house. He was arranging for a wedding, and Ananda Shastri had gone there. So he said, who's there music concert in the evening? It was very common those days to have a music program. He said, I'm not sure actually, because I'm not thought about it. I don't have the ability to pay that much of money right now. So I'm thinking, who should I ask? If they say no, if they ask something more, it's a very prickly situation. So immediately Ananda Shastri falls at his feet and holds on. He says, as long as I am there, you don't have to worry about such things. It is not labor, it is seva that I will be doing. I will be very happy to come, and I will come and sing today evening. So that is the kind of friendship and respect that people had. And again, like I said, Ananda Shastri, well-known singer. There is no need for him to sing for free for another musician. But that was what it is. And he talks about two music connoisseurs of Bangalore. One is Dushtabuddhi Surappa and Vamana Jayanti Venkoba Rao. Both these are very interesting characters. Dushtabuddhi is a character from the play Chandrahasa. Chandrahasa's prospective father-in-law, who tries to kill Chandrahasa, but his daughter would have fallen in love with Chandrahasa. So when the Natakas used to happen, this Surappa, who was a clerk in the government printing press, he would play that role very well. He was renowned to play that role of Dushtabuddhi. So whenever Dr. Gundanna would go and meet him, he will say, what's happening, Dushtabuddhi? So for people who don't know the context, they'll be wondering why is this person so blatantly calling the other Dushta Buddhi. And then Gundana once, when he called him in this manner, DVG says, why are you calling him Dushta Buddhi? He says, because he used to play this role of Dushta Buddhi, and that's the reason why he is called so. But strange are the ways of the world. The title of Dushta Buddhi is given to Surappa, who is not at all a wicked person, but that's how the world is. And Venkoba Rao is another great connoisseur. He realized that Vamana Jayanti is not very popular. See, Ramanavami or Gokhale Ashtami, these are very popular festivals. So if you call a musician that time, they'll be really busy because there'll be so many programs. He realized Vamana Jayanti not many people celebrate. So if I call musicians that time, then they will be free, they will come. So very, very enthusiastically he will celebrate Vamana Jayanti. And he says Venkoba Rao probably got a salary of 50 or 60 rupees. But the enthusiasm he used to nurture in his heart was worth millions and millions. That is the fortune of the poor. So one need not have great amount of this thing to have a good way to spend an evening. And there's another extraordinary episode of Gayaka Kempegoda, or the singer Kempegoda. He is also called Bhairavi Kempegoda because he was so renowned for singing the raga Bhairavi. Once there was a relative of DVG, Venkapaya, who lived in Bangalore, and he was an English teacher in RBNMS in the cantonment region, and DVG was staying with him. Suddenly, it is sometime in the evening, I think it was about 7:38 in the night, there was a knock at the door. Then who goes and opens the door? Who is it? And he says in Tamil, Venkappa, give me 8 annas. He says, why do you want 8 annas? He says, don't you know the reason? This is not the first time you are seeing me outside your house late in the evening. Why I want 8 annas? So obviously for to have a drink. But Venkapaya says, sure, I can give you 8 annas, but when do we get to listen to your music? He says, what is there in music? Of course I can sing, but give me 8 annas, I will come back. So he takes, goes inside, opens the box, give 2 4 anna coins. Kempegoda takes it. And both of them, DVG and Venkapaya, they are waiting on the terrace of the house because it is probably summer time. They have put the mats. They are waiting for the eager return of Kempegoda. And Kempegoda has his usual this thing, comes back, and then he starts singing Ananda Bhairavi. And it goes on till late in the night and completely, takes them to a different world. And another episode, a few years later, suddenly when DVG is walking through this KR market area, there is some news, Kempegoda is singing in some shop. So by the time he runs and goes there, already he has left. But then he realized that Kempegoda was sitting on a sack of grain in the shop because the shopkeeper apparently told him, sir, you have all the concerts in the evenings. Where can I leave my shop and come and listen to your concerts? I don't have the bhagya to listen to your music. So he says, what is a big deal? I will sing now. He starts singing Saveri Raga. So it is a spontaneous, exposition of something for the sake of that person who is really interested in music. Nowadays, there are people who, for the sake of publicity, they will sing in a bus and they will sit on garbage and sing. They will go to some fancy places and sing just to create some, ruckus. But here there's a genuine outpouring. He's sitting there on a sack of rice. He doesn't need any audience. He's singing for that one person. That is the kind of connection that he had. In fact, there is one very interesting story I heard. The famous flautist T.R. Mahalingam. He was very well known for his mischief. In the sense, he will come late, he will come drunk, and he will be very unpredictable. So once he had shown up about 1 hour late, totally drunk, and the audience naturally, after waiting for 1 hour, they are all chit chat, the sound is coming, and he came and sat down on the stage, and in the front row there was the famous actor Nagesh, the comedian and actor from Tamil movies, and Nagesh was patiently waiting to listen to Mahalingam, and other people were all chit chat, and Mali was very upset. He said, Nagesh, come, let us go to your house. So he takes Nagesh in his car and with all the musicians goes to the house and for 4.5 hours plays a full concert just for Nagesh. He says, you are really interested in listening to me, so I will play a concert. So like that, the musicians of those days, some of them, they don't really, if there is one connoisseur, that's enough. They don't need a full packed house of 50,000 people. One person who appreciates every small slide, every small jaru, every small kampita gamaka, they are happy. So like that, Kempe Gowda also sang in some store. In this episode, something very interesting I should bring to your notice. Often and often DVG would write in his introductory essays that all these things I have recollected from memory, I have not referred to any records, it's all from what I remember and my memory is not good, he writes in this. I have very poor memory. If he has poor memory, I don't know what we can say of other people like us. But he says, if there is any mistake, please tell me, I will be happy to correct it, because these are not written with very rigorous research and so on. So once, when this article came on Gayaka Kempe Gowda, H.K. Veerana Gowda, who was a well-known politician of that time, and he was also, I think, related to Kempe Gowda, or he knew Gayaka Kempe Gowda, he wrote to DVG saying that there are some errors in your essay. He is actually not from Coimbatore. He is from some other place. He is from Nagavara near Chenpatna. And he writes little bit about Kempe Gowda and his nature and his addiction to alcohol being the only negative trait in him. Otherwise, he was very knowledgeable and very friendly, and he used to teach a lot of people and so on. So like this, he prints that person's note at the end of this while bringing out the book. So initially, I told you it was all published as article series, but when it came out as a book some years later, he made it a point to publish this. Similarly, in the 4th volume, he has published a note by Diwan Rangacharlu's grandson. So like this, we can see that whenever somebody corrects him, he is very happy to acknowledge that and put it as part of the essay. Then Chintalapalli Venkatrao, he is another musician, and DVG and Krishna Rao were going one day to Lalbagh to get some fresh air, and they were chatting, and then this Chintalapalli Venkatrao was there. So DVG says, hey, we should kidnap this fellow Venkatrao. Come, let's kidnap him and take him right away at this moment. So then they were going in a car, and they just basically kidnap him, put him in the car, and they drive to Vijaya College of Music. And the Vijaya College of Music was Narayana Swami Bhagavatar was the principal. He says, hey, Chintalapalli Venkatrao, so many days I have not seen you, and they are so happy to see each other. And he says, how many years it's been, Narayana Swami, since I heard you play violin. It has been a long time since I heard you also to sing. I want you to sing Raga Mukhari. And so then immediately, just they 10 minutes earlier or 15 minutes earlier, this poor Venkatrao was walking in Lalbagh, but he was kidnapped and taken to Vijaya College of Music, and suddenly he is singing Sheenamai with Narayana Swami playing violin, and a complete music baitak is in place. So again and again, this shows us how we can take charge of what we want to do, and we can convert a dull evening into something exciting. It is in our hands. And then he also writes about how Venkatrao knew a lot of Devarnamas, and poor DVG, he would say, collect all the compositions of your ancestors, I will get it published, I will do all the proofreading for you, you should do this work. Like now our Dr. Ganesh says to a lot of people, you barirappa, either baribeko, you should collect your memories and put it down, we will get it printed. So this nature of DVG has got carried forward even to this generation in some of our scholars. And he talks about some of the great Vainikas and violinists of Bangalore. He talks about violinist Tayappa, Puttappa. Again, like many of these names, we have not heard any recording. We just know because DVG has written about them. And how Puttappa's concert was organized in the Kannada Sahitya Parishad. And he talks about some of the Nagaswara artists of Bangalore at that time. Even today, sometimes we hear some Nagaswara Vidwans who are so good. It could be in a wedding, it could be in a temple, or even it could be like, some of the people who are walking with a cow and just going around places. Sometimes the sense of music is so good, and it may be they may have been trained well, or they may just play with a lot of feel. But we find there are people, but how many of us would go and find out their name, or what they are. But DVG was a person like that. Now, at most, you may stand in your balcony, take a video on your phone and send it on a WhatsApp family group. Hey, this guy in my neighborhood or something. But here, DVG would go and interact with everybody, know about them, and no wonder he has written in such great detail. And once he talks about story of Sheshagiri Rao, who is a district judge of Madras province, and he had gone to some temple, some village in Tamil Nadu, and there was a Nagaswara player who was very, very good, and he says, this Sheshagiri Rao, who was a district judge, he says, you are so good in Nagaswara, can you come and perform in Bangalore for a few days? We will take care of all your expenses, everything. You come, there are a lot of Rasikas in Bangalore, so you should come and play. So many people will listen to you. And this Nagaswara artist, he says, sir, my livelihood comes from the Inam lands given as a generous grant to the temple. If you want to listen to me, please ask me to play any raga of your choice right here, right now. I'll happily play it for you to the best of my abilities. You can listen to it and other people also can listen to it. But I can't leave this temple and come somewhere else. So you see, this person has, if you say, I will take you to some place and make you a great star, immediately people will run after such a person. But there are some Nagaswara Vidwans who are very contented and very happy. Then there is another extraordinary character called Drama Varadacharya, who was E.V. Varadacharya, who used to play some of the very, very nice roles, like Prahalad Charite, he would play Hiranyakashipu, and he was very good. And he was a very good friend of S.G. Narasimhacharya, who would write a lot of Kanda Padyas for his Natakas. And he talks about how A. Rangaswamy Iyengar, who was the editor of the Hindu, I think. So he had come to Chamarajpet to stay with his nephew, and he said, let us go to one of the plays of Varadacharya. Then DVG said, okay, I will come along with you, because Rangaswamy Iyengar did not know Kannada. He is a Tamilian. And when DVG was trying to translate something, he said, I don't want, I understand. So he enjoyed the complete play and had no problems, although he doesn't know Kannada. And again, DVG being what he is, he analyzes why Rangaswamy Iyengar was able to enjoy the Nataka of Varadacharya, although it was in a different language. He says, the principle hidden in this tale are relevant to our context even today. The plot, that is Prahalada or Manmatha, is familiar to the Tamilians as it is to Kannadigas. Whether any Pauranika story is familiar to everybody in India. In the case of Kannada words, the Tamil people are acquainted with them as related words. So there are words which are related to Kannada and Tamil. In the case of Sanskrit words, the language nears the pan-India range and hence easy for non-Kannadigas to follow. And fourth and final point is Carnatic music is common to both Kannadigas and Tamilians. So when we look at all this Galata which we have, I will not learn Kannada, I will not speak Tamil, I will not learn Hindi, and this kind of madness which we have, we find that somebody who knows Kannada very well can easily follow Hindi. Somebody who has learned Gujarati very well can easily follow Marathi. So like this, if we put efforts in our mother tongue, we will be able to easily follow the other languages, because they are all from the same root, which is Sanskrit. And DVG so nicely says, just as India needs a collective mindset beyond Jati and Varna, one can say that we need literature and culture that transcends language. Through Varadacharya's plays, Tamil-Kannada friendship developed and strengthened. And he, like I told you, S.G. Narasimhacharya was one of the associates of Varadacharya, and used to write a lot of verses for his plays. And to run drama company is not an easy thing. There are a lot of costs involved, a lot of people management. And sometimes, in order to have a few shows, they had to borrow a lot of money. So once Varadacharya had borrowed a lot of money, and with the interest and the chakrabaddi and everything, it had come to some 30,000 rupees. So 30,000 rupees is a lot of money in those days. I mean, if you look at it in today's terms, it may even be like 2 crores or something like that, or at least like 70 lakhs. That kind of, it's a huge amount of money in those days. And what happened was he was repaying this money slowly, but it was not at the pace at which he had promised. So the person who had lent the money, he put a case. And Varadacharya went to a lawyer and he said, is there a way out? And Varadacharya's friend, Varadacharya doesn't go to the lawyer, his friend goes to a lawyer and says, is there a way out of this? He has put a case. And then the lawyer must be a very smart guy. He looks at all the papers. He says, this one particular document is not there. The petitioner has no supporting evidence to prove that the incident related to the document is there. So there is no proof that actually the money has been given. This much of money has been given. So if your friend is willing to say that he has not given this money, then this case won't stand. That's all. Because a very crucial document is missing. When Varadacharya's friend goes to him and gives this suggestion, he just has a loud guffaw. He says, should this tongue utter a lie for a mere 30,000 rupees? How many times the Almighty has blessed these hands with such 30,000s? Will He not bless me again? Let it be. What will that rich man do? He will take all my old screens and costumes and everything. Let him take whatever he wants. I will borrow money elsewhere. I will buy new screens and I will stage more plays. I will return this money and also I will return the new loan what I take. Telling a lie to come out of a debt is not something I can do. You see the nobility of the people of that era. There is paucity of time. There are so many interesting episodes. I was hoping to complete this volume today, but I think it is better for me to explore in a little bit more detail some of the great people, because like I said yesterday, but for DVG's record of some of these great souls, we have no other documentation anywhere else. So it is really valuable for us to go through this. So tomorrow I'll wrap up with the second volume and hopefully cover some more episodes from the third volume. And then maybe at another point of time, a few months later, when Sri Shashi Kiran and Sri Ramu have time for me, I'll speak about the other episodes. So with this, I will end today and see you tomorrow. Thank you. For real feast, you have to read the books. There is nothing which comes close to that. And like I said yesterday, the whole idea is for me to invite you to read these volumes either in Kannada or preferably in Kannada, but if not in English. So if you read it, there is nothing like it. Thank you.